Welcome, Tom Golden. Thanks for joining me for this hangout and talking about the shadow side of men. And thanks for joining me.
You're welcome, Martin. It's good to be here.
Tom, before we start, would you just mention a little bit about your latest book and then we'll dig into it? But you're author of a number of books around men's lives and helping mothers and sons, and then we'll dig in.
Yeah, the latest one is about boys. It's trying to help moms to understand their boys and how they're different in order to help moms get closer to them. So the title is Helping Mothers Be Closer to Their Sons, Understanding the Unique World of Boys.
Excellent, excellent. We'll put a link below on it.
Thank
I
you.
wanted to talk to you because a concept in the men's work that I thought was very valuable in my life was the idea of knowing your shadow side and honoring and dealing with it and addressing it and keeping it in mind. And to me, it gave me permission that my actions are important, even if sometimes I'm just a selfish person or something else. It's okay to have a shadow. It's what you do with it with your actions. So I'm going to start with there because I think I'd really like to talk about it more because I think it's so important in maturing for men to know their shadow. So wherever you want to dig in on that.
Yeah, well, it's essential, and we have to have a shadow because it's basically the shadow is that which we don't know about ourselves. It's the unknown. It's the unconscious. It's what we don't know about ourselves. And of course, most of us don't know a lot of things about ourselves, and so we have a fairly good-sized shadow. So the shadow is really all it says is just what we don't know. This unknown part that sort of is underneath that is yet to be unearthed.
Well, I've sometimes heard a reference to shadow side being more like the news, the bad news you find out, and golden shadow being the better news. But is there a distinction, or is that just a personal interest some people have?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. The golden shadow is when we have repressed a part of ourselves that's really good. So the shadow is not just bad stuff. It can be good stuff. If, someone with really low self-esteem, they see themselves as horrible, but they may have this shadow side, of course, that's very good. It's a beautiful thing, but they can't see it. It's something that's unconscious for them. And usually, as with most shadow stuff, it gets projected out onto somebody else. So someone like that would see someone as being wonderful. They'll see a hero as someone who's just wonderful and beautiful. And what they're doing is they're seeing themselves, that good part of themselves, in someone else. And the same thing holds true with the negative stuff. I mean, we tend to see the negative stuff in us in someone else.
And, this reminds me of a mentor when I was talking about admiring these different people. And he said, only a prince can dream of a castle. And he was talking about me not seeing the value in myself, where I was saying these people are great. I'm not that.
Yes.
And boy, did that get my attention. I mean, for years, I kept thinking about that, because most of my life I had a very low self-esteem and self-worth and strong negative conversation in my head about me. I was the best critic.
Yes.
And I thought, this doesn't serve my life. And I didn't want to be, a narcissistic ass, but I figured there's got to be a happy medium somewhere in there.
Yes, and you found more balance by being able to find the part of yourself that was not such a bad guy.
Yeah. And then there was another piece that was worried when I was younger. I remember worried, am I a good person or not? Am I, I asked another wise mentor one time, and he said, the answer is correct to both of those. It's all about your actions. And is this related to the shadow?
It's what related to the shadow?
The idea of, I talked to someone and I said, the truth is I'm not sure if I'm a good or bad person. And his comment to me was, you're both. What do you do in your actions? And I think this kind of is related to discovering your shadow and a place to stand when you look at the darker sides of it. And I'd like your comments on that.
Well, the shadow doesn't discriminate, whether it's good or bad. It just is unconscious. It's something we're not aware of. And so it's good for us then to be able to be aware of that part of ourselves. We become closer to being whole, when we can see both sides and see them clearly.
Excellent. Well, any advice on becoming constructively aware of your shadow?
Yes, get some good male friends. The best place for this is among men or a spouse that loves you. Because the first thing we need in order to do work of finding out things about ourselves that we don't know and maybe don't like is to be able to feel a certain sense of safety. When you're around men that love you, but are going to tell you the truth, there's a certain amount of safety that we have that we can kind of experiment. We can kind of look at things in a different way, because really you need to be able to see things from a place of safety first. Then you see it and you go, oh my God, I can't believe that's a part of me. And then you slowly digest that. And it becomes something where you go, oh yeah, that's me. Rather than pointing out at someone else and saying, you're the bad guy. We start to see, oh, it's me too.
This
But
old
finding people who will tell you the truth, is the advice that I would have. And it could be a spouse, it could be a men's group. I've been in a men's group now for, I don't know how long we've been together. It's over 20 years. And when you are with men that long and you are invested in the wholeness and health of your buddies, you're going to tell them the truth, the things that other people might not ever tell them. And that's a great way to find out, about your shadow.
I think of it as giving the truth from a place of compassion is what I think of when you say that.
Yeah, yeah. When we know that people love us, it's a whole lot easier to hear things we don't want to hear, you know?
The other thing that to me I think is related to shadow is I remember saying to someone who was really criticizing somebody, and I said, the tough thing about finding faults in other people is usually it doesn't take much of looking in the mirror to find the exact same fault in some other aspect of my own life.
That's exactly right.
And is this to me would be related to that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's shadow work. The people who get very upset about other people. Oh, they just that's a tip off. It's probably a projection. Because when we can evaluate someone and go, that person has this and this problem, that's probably not a projection. But when we get tight, that's a tip off. It says, uh-oh, something's probably cooking in me about this whole issue. I probably have some stuff going on that's related. So yeah.
Reminds me of the Star Trek, if anyone's old enough to remember, where there were two different groups that were killing each other off and were like down to the last person. And one had a dark side on this side of his face, and the other had a dark side on this side of the face. And there was nothing different except for that distinction of them,
yes,
to distinguish them. And it's so easy to see when you see cultural things. I remember seeing that with one time someone was very strongly against the Palestinians, and then a Palestinian strongly against the Israelis, and I went, my God, they're identical in their neuroses. And then and then but I map it onto myself with that as well. It's any group. It's like the more you hate something, the more it's probably pointing to a shadow of yourself that you're not willing to have the courage to look at. Is this aligned with that as maybe a way to look for it?
When you look at things like the Palestinians and the Israelis, it gets even more complicated because you're just completely identified with your way of seeing things, and the other people are identified with their own way of seeing things. And it's based on a lot of old, unfinished stuff. I mean, if your parents were killed by a certain group, you'd be identified, you'd be rock solid. I mean, so that really keeps people from being able to see both sides, keep people from being able to see the shadow when you're so invested in one way of looking at things. So that makes it even tougher, In fact, there's as gradations in how tough it is to find shadow stuff, and that's one of the factors is how identified we are. Another factor is whether it's something from our personal stuff or something from our past, our family. When it's a negative event that's unconscious, that's sort of submerged, it's a lot harder for people to bring that up and to work with it, because that kind of projection is what we call transference. in therapy, when someone will treat another person as if they were the old person who had the problem, who they had a problem with. And so they treat that person. And that's a more difficult kind of shadow projection to withdraw. Whereas if it's just something in oneself, say you're greedy or you're something else. I mean, we can sort of see that in an easier way than we can seeing our old stuff that gets projected out to somebody else.
Yeah, and like you said, with the two different groups, the Palestinian and Israeli, I mean, years and years of from each perspective, tragedy and wounds
It's
from
almost
their
impossible.
perspective, and it's and so I meant that with great compassion for both sides.
Yes,
And it's
yes,
so easy to see it when I look at it, because growing up in DC, I saw that with everything. I'd
yes.
see it with the Catholics and the Pentecostals, and I talking to them, and they're like, "Well, they're this and they're this." I'm going, "I'm sorry, your mannerisms are matching the
Yes.
person you're criticizing, or whatever else it is."
And there's another piece of all this, Martin, and that is that there is such a thing as evil.
Uh-huh.
And you can withdraw all the projections you want, but there may be a person or a group or a thing that is literally evil. And that's different from projections.
Would you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's important, because there is a difference in maturing where you go, no, that's not just, I can't take credit here. There's something really bad here.
Yes.
I am going to be unfair and say that, some of the killings that are occurring and bombing and things, I think they're getting close to that point. But would you talk about that a little bit?
Well, there's not much to say, really. It's just a matter of being able to distinguish between what's evil and what's projection.
Okay, if an alien came to Earth and said, "I'm new to this human thing,"
Yeah.
could you help me distinguish between projections and evil? What would you tell the alien? Now, they've got an emotional system, but they don't have the cultural background.
Yeah, the first thing is to see how much juice you've got.
Okay.
When we have a lot of juice, when we have a lot of stuff pouring out, that's probably something that's projected, even when there's evil there. But if someone kills your spouse, that's an evil act on their part. Is that something where we shouldn't be upset and angry and furious? No. It's very appropriate then in so many ways. So we have to be careful not to judge people for things that we don't know about. So just differentiating between those two is important. And it's just, I shudder sometimes because, the whole thing about withdrawing the projections and blah, 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 it's just almost too nicey nice.
Yeah.
Like, oh, once I get them all withdrawn, I'll be a flower child in peace and love, dove. No, that's bullshit. That's just bullshit, because, there is evil. Evil is in the world. If we can't see it, we're screwed. We got to be able to see it.
I think that's also an important distinction as well. The ability to go, I'm mad and that's wrong.
Yes.
That's evil. That's
Yes.
off the charts. That's not acceptable. And I think it's easy to get stuck in those, or not have distinctions in those, and going with it.
The other thing that
go ahead.
The thing that crossed my mind, Martin, is the book by Scott Peck on evil. He said some fantastic things in that book, but one of the things that always stuck with me was, he said, evil always leaves chaos in its path. So I think I'd tell the alien, I'd say, look what's following behind this. Is it chaos or is it love? Is it chaos or is it caring? Because evil tends to leave a chaotic path. It's like a wake of chaos that goes behind it.
Wow, what a wonderful distinction. Which book was that? So if someone's listening, they get it.
It's the Scott Peck book on evil. It's called the Elements of Evil or something. I forget exactly what it is. But if you look up evil and Scott Peck, it'll come up.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is an important piece that to me, it's sort of keeping a watchful eye on this. And I like the idea of assuming there will always be a shadow side. There's no getting over it. It's sort of like keeping a watchful eye. Am I taking a real stand, or is my ego wanting to grandstand?
Yes.
And just always being willing to look at that, to me, seems to develop layers in an empowering way, not a disempowering way.
Yes. And actually, it can be fun sometimes. If you can develop a sense of being able to laugh at yourself, if you
Which
can
I
develop
also
a
think is
sense of,
important in having. I called it. Somebody asked with kind of the ADD personality I developed is I had to develop a compassionate observer of myself
yes,
to
yes,
get out of just the brutal critic inside.
yes. Yeah, the Buddhists call that booty.
Okay,
They call it
versus
booty. It's
Moody, like in growing up in DC, was different, right?
yes. They talk about the ego as being a mass like this, and when we are conscious and aware, when we try and keep our attention on something, when we meditate, in other words, uh, booty forms a bump on ego. And the more we meditate, the more we work on self awareness and being here in the present tense, the bigger that bump gets until booty, after a while, becomes like a big bump that comes out. And then after a long while, it snaps off and becomes an independent part that is able to see things from a clear place, not an emotionally ego laden place, but a clear place. Now, this is something that happens with people who been working on themselves for a long, long time. So, but it's something to work towards, developing that part of us that can see things from a detached place.
Yeah.
Critical.
There was something I liked that I've seen a men's group before of where they resolve conflicts by having a statement that says, "What I am angry or see in you lives in me," and then declaring it as a tool for it. And I thought, what an interesting idea. It doesn't mean the person didn't do something wrong. It doesn't mean that it's not bad, but it was a way of creating a reflection. And there's, to me, power in that, in being aware of it. It's not a disempowering. It actually creates more true grounded power instead of what I call brittle power.
Yes, I like that. I like the idea of just acknowledging that same thing lives within me, and here's how I see it in you. You know, it's good.
I think this is a great piece I wanted to distinguish because I think it's part of maturing as a man. And I liked what you said is it takes hard work, but developing good men friends are the
Yeah.
ones that will be there and have compassion. Now, some men are uncomfortable with the idea of men that love them or something, but in my life, it's not.
Yeah.
It
No,
has nothing to do with anything physical or anything else. It's caring at that level. And but it's really wonderful, the piece of developing the friendships over time. And it takes, to me, real hard work where they come from compassion, but they're either a great mirror for you to see it, or the ability to have that trust where they can let you know what's really going on and give you that
yes,
feedback.
yes. And sadly, that kind of connection in men has been discouraged in our culture for a while, particularly the last 50 years.
You know,
Where
I
men's groups and men's
yeah.
uh, places have been attacked, and places where men would meet by themselves have been demolished. But on the other hand, you have thousands upon thousands of places where women can meet just as women. So we're living in a world that is one sided. And
I
as
I
men,
rem-
we need to be able to see that and adjust to it. And that means developing male friendships, to help take care of them, help them take care of us, and just to check in. A great male group is just check in.
yeah.
Here's where I'm at. Here's what's happening in my life right now. The other men just sit and listen. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Then the next guy goes. It doesn't have to be something where you talk about deep psychological crap. It can just be, here we are checking in.
It was invaluable in dealing with stress with my parents in the hospital because my check-in might be, I want to take the doctor out back and beat him to death at almost any time, and I want someone to listen to me, really getting it. And it's a different way of listening than for me. And I want to honor the value of women's listening, but men's listening is different.
Yes, it
It's
is.
different. It's more of giving attention than giving emotion, is how I describe it.
Yes, yes,
The attention is given. It's while equally important is the wonderful loving emotion like I get from my wife with the same statement, you
yes,
know, or and I think that's also a core thing that fathers give their kids and also a environment that creates the ability to look at your own shadow side. Because
Yes.
when you have someone giving their attention, it's a little different than embracing you with the emotions.
Yes.
And both are important. I don't mean to all say that women can't do this or men can't, but I remember back in the Men's Inquiry years ago, sitting in my own living room, exploring something like, what does it mean to be a mentor? And feeling an odd feeling of authentic connection that was different than I had ever felt. And the only time I had felt that closeness was usually with women, but it was merged and was physical. This was just a sense of not being alone and connected,
Yes.
but being my own man and independent.
Yes.
And how powerful that was, that we seldom have. The tragedy to me is this drive of isolation and not looking at this and not having spaces for men to do it, to me, is a breeding ground for even violence.
Yeah. Yeah, what I've noticed with men's versus women's caring is that the men tend to care for each other through offering respect and admiration.
Right.
And the women will tend to care for each other by offering caring, you know.
And both are beautiful and both are great.
Both work. But the men's fuel tank is filled up when they feel respected and admired.
Yeah.
You know, and we're missing that so much in this culture because there's so much male bashing. Men are the problem. Men are this, men are that. These terrible men. Oh, you're a man. Oh, my God. Well, the poor little boys don't want to grow up to be men.
No.
You know,
They
we're
do.
living in a crazy place. We're living in a crazy place. And as men, we need to know that, and we need to help take care of ourselves, you know?
Well, I'm going to add that I say without it, they're going to go to the dark side with a big shadow side and act out.
Well, that's probably true
or
too.
Give up.
That, and they'll just not be able to manifest their own integrity and their own way of being.
Yeah,
you know, because it's shamed continually.
Right. Well, this is the topic I wanted to explore, is the idea of the shadow side, because I to re-anchor back to it is how important it is. And I love your description of it's the stuff outside of us.
Yeah.
What's outside our awareness.
But we don't know.
That in and how important it is to hold that and have it. It's just like, there's a part of me that's a real SOB. And if my wife's in danger in a dark alley, I want it to come out in force.
Yes.
And when I was more of a snag, do you know what that is, Tom?
I know what that is.
Recovering a sensitive new age guy. I was more like, well, let me empower her to handle herself. What a worthless, spineless creature to be against, in my view. And I'm not saying that without compassion, but this is a piece of it, is having a role, that giving permission with it, and working on the shadow of, okay, that's outside mine, and having the honest conversation. Is this my ego, or is this my stand? And as friends, sometimes you'll say, you'll give me a hint, and sometimes your favorite line is, go meditate again, which unfortunately often helps. And I just want to answer, but I think it's very important that are we men that will look at our shadow, but also, are we men that will stand up against real evil? And I think that's a distinction you brought up.
Yes, like this election.
Yes, right. So I think this wraps it up, and maybe we can get some comments below, Tom.
Good.
And I hope to do more of these discussions with you. I want to say, how can they learn more about your book?
Well, they can go to menaregood.com.
Excellent. And find out more about it.
Things.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Tom.
You're welcome. It's good to be with you, Martin.
Thanks. Same here.